Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Warwick District Council. Today is the 21st of January 2025, and this is our first meeting of the year. So if it's not too late, can I wish members a very happy new year? My name's Councillor Andrew Melton. I'm the chair of the committee. We're joined tonight by members of the committee. We also have officers supporting committee and also officers presenting along with portfolio holders this evening as well. And we can also welcome one of our non-exec directors from Milverton Homes. I think it's Mr. Moore, is that correct?
Good evening.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for coming. And if it's your first time here as well today, very welcome. So we'll start with apologies for absence. So we have apologies from Councillor Collins. And we have Councillor Kohler substituting for Councillor Russell. So, Councillor Kohler, welcome. I know you know what you're doing here, because having been on the committee for a number of years previously. Declarations of interest, item 2. Do members have any declarations of interest on items on the agenda? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Item 3 is we have 2 sets of minutes to sign off, from the 13th of November and the 3rd of December last year. I will propose those from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong, thank you. All those content? Great, I think we're everyone. Brilliant, thank you. That's unanimous. Now, there is one, I'd call it a matter arising from the minutes, which is I know, unusual. The November minutes, I was reminded, actually included quite a detailed recording of the discussion that we had around the move to the pump rooms. Now, what I was conscious of, I don't know if members of avid followers of audit and standards as well, but there was an audit report that was presented to audit and standards, I think at the beginning of this year, that actually gave a very different perspective on how the move to the pump rooms had gone, and I think it raised a number of challenges, a number of problems. Whereas the report that we had in November, I think, gave us a view that everything was fine. So I have asked Mr. Knight just to give us a bit of an explanation as to why we've got 2 seemingly very different accounts of the same thing.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Chair. I've spoken to David Arkington, the sort of head of transformation. He's explained that it's a timing issue. So I think the reports came quite close together, but they represented different periods of time. So what I've asked, or I will be asking Dave to do, is to direct the members to sort of set that officially for the record. And so you'll get a communication either this week or next week setting that out. So that clarifies it. And David would be more than happy to come back to the committee if needed to discuss it. But just to give members assurance, the pump room is working well. I've been there myself, I've spoken to staff and spoken to some of the customers, and as far as I'm concerned, it's working okay, as we expect. The one area just I think we do need to improve on just the signage. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, the audit report was written in the end of September,
Yep.
but not presented until January. And the overview and scrutiny report came at effectively the beginning of November. So that would have been written at the end of October, beginning of November.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, so I guess what would have been helpful, I think, for members with those reports, actually, I know there is a time gap, but actually it's probably only 4 or 5 weeks, I would expect, between when one was written and the next were written, is at least if I think the paper that was presented to this committee should have at least referenced some of the challenges that have been picked up by the audit report, and if they've been solved, great. We like to hear that. We always like to hear if we've identified problems, we solve them. But I think to get a report that didn't reference that, I think it just gave me some cause for concern that we weren't particularly very joined up.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point, and I think I'll get David Arkington, as I said, to write to everybody officially as well, just for the record, to sort of set that out as well. But if any members want to meet the team at the pump room, more than welcome to do so. And I would encourage, if you haven't been there, to pay a visit. the staff do welcome it, and they like to hear and see from people from the council taking an interest as well.
Right, thank you. Any other comments on that particular matter? Okay, we'll move on. We'll keep going. Right, item 4 is the work programme and forward plan. So there's two items which I'd like to add to the work programme, which probably won't be any of surprise to anyone. One is local government reorganisation, and the other is devolution. We don't know what that is going to entail as yet. But what I would suggest we do, if members are happy, is that we actually put a note on for our next meeting to check in and a discussion at that point, because obviously as soon as the government actually says something, we might know what we're facing and what we might be asked to look at. So I think that's something that I think this committee will, in the same way that for those of you who are here in the last administration when we went through the process of looking at a super district with Stratford District Council. Scrutiny played quite a key role in monitoring that, discussing that, and then providing I think a cathartic outlet for officers and the leader at the end when it didn't quite pan out. But I think it will be an important one for us to be pretty fairly close to. Councillor Davison.
I'm sure everybody's aware that there's a councillor briefing on Friday about this thing. The rumours are that we may hear this week, so we may be able to say something significant. And then the Thursday afterwards is our extra council meeting to debate, to try and get a view where, as a council, so councillors generally, where we sit. And my guess is it won't go purely down party lines, but I may be wrong on that.
Right, we've got your prediction on record, Councillor Davison. Let's see where it goes. Okay, so are there any other items on the work plan that people wish to discuss? I have just I've asked a couple of questions sort of via committee services about a couple of items that are coming, just to see whether they're still on time, and we will see how the next cabinet agenda shapes up as well, because the next meeting's looking fairly busy. Right, with that then, I'm going to move on to item 5, which is the Q2 performance report. Now, again, this is something that we've been involved in, I think, shaping, I think it's fair to say, over the last couple of meetings, and we've had a presentation on it previously. This is, I think, if I'm right, I think it's sort of the first in anger report to us. So I'm going to ask, am I coming to you, Mr. Leach, on this? I'm going to ask Mr. Leach to give us an overview of this, and then I will open it up to any questions for the committee. I think what we did decide, one of the steers that we agreed when we talked about this, just to remind members, is that what we're looking for here is, as far as possible, a longer term view of the performance of a particular area. And then it's open to us as a committee for areas where we have a concern that we can ask for a specific report about that at a following overview and scrutiny meeting as well, so we get a plan of action. So I'd like the conversation to sort of happen in that context, if possible. I'm probably going to allow I think this is about a 15-20 minute slot, or less, depending on, much shorter, it depends on where the conversation goes, just to where we've got a reasonable amount to get through tonight, so want to keep it going. So Mr. Leach, coming to you.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, while you had Q1 performance report previously, that was a kind of a draft attempt and kind of getting guidance from this committee about what you'd like to see, how you'd like to see the information presented, what you'd think you'd find useful for the council overall. So this is, while Q2 performance report, it is kind of the first one, as you described, as the first one in anger with extra information in there. I think the bit which I'd add in there and draw members' attention to is obviously the email I sent out late on Monday as well, which now provides clear direction and link for the members in terms of how to access the service area plans overall, the quarterly performance reports, the procurement which is ongoing at the moment, significant risk register and the projects list as well, because that kind of feeds into this report in terms of performance overall. And it's where I direct you as a committee to spend a bit of time regularly just dipping in, having a look around, seeing what you want to see in there and help bringing it back for your work programme. I think to develop this further as well, which is set out in the report, there will be a performance management framework as part of the service area plan report to the Cabinet in February. So that will be an area where, while you're looking at this, again, you need to have that performance management framework in your mind when, at your next meeting, if you're minded to call that item in. I think the bits I'd highlight is that the next report, quarterly performance report, is actually only due out on the 26th of February. So they're beginning to get closer together, which was one of the concerns that members had originally about the time it took. And that was just about while we're setting the framework up and the process, which means that you'll look at the next performance report on the 18th of March, which I think is worth thinking about again. So actually, if you want to bring stuff forward more detail, you might bring it back to that meeting from this report. Just try and manage your workload. What we are looking at, I had a very helpful chair's briefing with the chair and vice chair. I've been talking to my colleagues today briefly about the potential to show within the performance report actually how long an item has been read, but also perhaps for a couple of those which have been longer as well, having some bit more analysis to see if they've, say, been red, then dropped to amber, then bot back to red, and see that pattern over time, just to bring a couple of graphs for you as well. We've got to be careful though, and this is part of the work which we've had discussions as officers, is not making the performance report too long, because if you make it too long, I know that people won't read it and won't engage with it in the same way. So it's about getting it focused and getting it presented in the right way for you. And I think on that bit, I think I'd highlight, obviously there's quite a few measures in here which relate to housing and assets. And some of those quite clearly cross-reference the work on the housing action plan and the compliance dashboard there. And what we've been talking with in the compliance board meeting with Paul Smith is about how next year, from the new service area plan on the compliance dashboard, the measures referenced within the service area plan with their reference number will be linked on the dashboard as well, so you can see that clear linkage across both. So it's clearly understandable which areas we're in. Yeah, and I think that's all I'll do for now, Chair.
Great, thank you, Mr. Leach. Oh, sorry.
There was one part, Chair, which neither of us has mentioned, I do apologise, is obviously there were some pre-scrutiny questions on this, which are available on the website, which I'm sure councillors have read, but they have been updated today with further details for councillors as well.
Great, thank you. Members, what questions do we have? Councillor Redford, will come to you first.
Thank you very much for the report. There are a couple of questions. I'm not altogether sure whether Mr. Leach is the right person I should be asking these questions to, because I'm pretty sure he won't be able to answer them. But I'm referring to the neighbourhood and assets. There's codes on each of these items. I have no idea what that code stands for in each one. So I don't know what part of neighbourhood. I can use my imagination and I can see that some of it is about road sweeping and other things are different things. But I'd like to know where the key is to identify what we are actually referring to there for a start. And neighbourhood assets, N and A24 I'm referring to, and that's about the mechanical sweepers, etc. Now, I know for a fact that roads in the rural areas are not as swept as regularly as the urban areas, but we do have other issues in the rural areas, such as a heavy leaf fall, and we have experienced over the last, well, since New Year, some more flooding, and most of that was down to leaves in the drains, and without regular maintenance of those drain covers, we are in a vulnerable position. So I really would like to know how you're going to achieve year on year, because obviously climate change, we are told that we're going to expect wetter weather. This can be improved. And the other one is Safer Communities, Leisure and Environment, and the code for that is SCLE 8. And it's talking about noise issues. I have a particular interest in that because two areas in my ward there is problems with noise, and it says whilst in December the average time to resolve noise nuisance is above average this month. It goes on to say about how long it takes. Why particularly in December? Do we understand why that is the case? Because there's no explanation why December should be any different from another month.
I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer that or not, Mr. Leach. There might be a comeback. Just dealing with the first one on neighbourhood and assets, about the street cleaning. We are seeing the ID Verdi contract performance review in March, and I think that might be a good pre-scrutiny question, or at least to give them notice that that's one of the areas that we want to talk about. I think that whole dynamic between we can get very focused on the towns rather than the rural service area. It might be an area that we want to actually ask ID Verdi to come prepared to talk about how we provide that right level of service. We can do that through committee services, I think. So if we could just make a minute of that, that'd be great. Thank you. And then Mr. Leach on the noise nuisance.
Chair, can I go back to the previous one first of all?
Of course you can.
Because the reason why I say that is because actually within the response in the actual report, it does actually flag up that on the street clean, that would be one of the bits highlighted within your report to ID Verdi. So I think that is very much one for you to focus on, and it's one the head of neighbourhood is actually looking at already. So would very much appreciate your input on the committee, should we say? That's why it's flagged that way. On the noise nuisance, apologies, no, I wouldn't have that level of detail myself. I need to go back and talk with the service area and then come back to you all as a committee.
Great, thank you. Councillor Davison, then Councillor
Just in terms of what the codes mean, these are the service areas, and Graham Leach has already referred to the business portal, and you got an email, was it yesterday, on that? If you do follow that link, I'm really delighted. You can see them here. So in terms of the noise nuisance, I've got it up, and it says that December the noise nuisance time was 45 days, November was 23 days or something like that. But actually it was worse in August. That was the worst day. So what's fantastic is this is live now, that we can see this, it's coming through. And to me, I want to thank all the officers for getting this far ahead. It is great. And the same with the report. We are now seeing metrics that we want. They're not in the right place, but we can see them and start engaging with them.
Thank you. At least we know they're not in the right place. Right. Councillor Kohler.
Thank you. Likewise, thank you very much for the report. I think when I was a permanent member of this committee, I think we've spent quite a lot of time talking about dashboards and that sort of thing. So this is great. Love it. I've got one question about the whatever you called it, the business intelligence portal, the SharePoint stuff. So that has got, I found the service area plans. I was having a little look through earlier today. So for example, in the finance one, I can see, for example, that F2, in the latest version of the finance plan, for F2, it currently says current status NA. So what I'm assuming has happened is that since the quarterly report was written, that would have been a snapshot at that point in time, at which point it was read, so it got sucked through into the quarterly report. But since then, the finance, what's it called? The finance service spreadsheet has since been updated, and so it no longer says that, and it now says the latest status per latest update. So firstly, have I understood that process right, that at some point the snapshot of all these is taken and it goes across into the quarterly report? I'm getting a thumbs up, that sounds good. In which case, I guess as soon as that snapshot's taken, for anything that isn't brought across, so you're only bringing across into the quarterly report those that are amber and red, anything else is kind of lost to the ethers of time. Is that right?
Through you, Chair, partly, And the reason why I say that is because the top of the performance report itself actually sets out how many measures there are for each service area and actually how they're performing overall as a service area. So actually you as a committee can sit there and go, actually how's X service area performing overall, to get that general feel as well, to give you that snapshot, which I think was the bit we discussed previously, Councillor Kohler, as well. And the bit I would say on there as well, which I failed to mention, which I really do need to mention, is also the service area plans for next year. The bit we're looking at is differentiating between targets and measures. So actually where we've got a regulatory ambition that we have to hit, such as the FOI response rate, that will be seen as a target, whereas more softer things be measures where we're looking at the trends over time.
Thank you for that, most helpful. I guess I've got one suggestion, and other members may shoot me down and say they're not interested, but having looked at this, what I thought was would be useful as an extra, if possible, would be a second appendix which has got the whole of the all of the measures for each service area. So I think it's the performance overview sheet of each spreadsheet that's got all of the measures in it, and just say, right, when we took this snapshot, that was the state of all of them. Because some of them do contain, for example, comments, and if there are comments against some of the green ones, we're then losing them. You're never going to see them. But it would also then kind of say, okay, well, this is how we were. So maybe provides a more rounded position of each service area. So at the moment we see just the reds and the ambers, but if actually most of the measures are green, we it's not really emphasised anywhere. So having a snapshot, saving each one each quarter, would publicly say, actually, 75% of the measures were green.
Through you, Chair, I can take that one back away. Actually, another point which that raises as well is that actually our performance management officer is actually saving away a snapshot of the service area plan each quarter as well when the data's all been entered. So actually we do have maintained that archive record so we can see where we were quarter on quarter as well. So we've got that bit. But you're right, publicly we don't say that other than that little chart at the front. So have a look at that.
Great, thank you. And I think just to add to that, I think if we could have that as an appendix is the right place for that, because I think what we've got here for probably the first time is actually we've got all the key measures we should be worried about in one place with a short explanation. And I think personally that's really useful for members, and we have to be slightly careful about just drowning in too much information. So I think if we could sort of separate that into an appendix, I think it's useful because it gives a slightly different view, but it doesn't detract too much from the main substance of the report. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on the point from Councillor Kohler there, when I was looking at the some of the measures, and this is in the amber category, I'm looking at page 11 of the report. On neighbourhood assets, this is about percentage of housing revenue account properties with EICR, and then I was thinking about where's the gas is covered, but I'm thinking these are the ones in amber, and I presume the one in gas certificates, which has got to be a pretty important measure. I guess I'm assuming that'll be in the green category, but correct me if I'm wrong here. But then I was looking at that. Well, that performance 98% when the measure is 100% to me seems pretty good. And therefore, does that mean gas is even higher? But it's in the amber. I'm thinking, therefore, I suppose the question is really, part of that is, at what point does it become green? Because there's obviously a lot of, suggestions, recommendations about improving no access policy to get these remaining ones in, similar to how we address no access policy for gas safety certificates. And I'm thinking, so is that the reason it's amber? Because it's 2% between target, 2% below target, which to me seems pretty good. And what's the difference between that and green, I suppose? Thank you.
So, shall I take this one, or do you want to? So my understanding is this, because this is a compliance measure, it's we either meet it or we don't. So actually, it's got to be 100%. It's no good being 99%. So the amber flags it as something for attention. But just to remind members as well, it's for the attention of the housing scrutiny committee. They will take the housing related ones because that's their remit, that's their role, rather than us. So I think it's a good example of one where actually, I think what Mr. Leach was mentioning earlier was that difference between having a measure and having a target. And actually, this is very much, this is a target that we have to hit. And if we don't hit it, we are not compliant. So, sorry. Did you want to round out on that one, Mr. Leach?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say one minor point as well, which you might want to consider from this evening when you're summing up, is actually those ones which do relate to housing and assets. There is Housing Scrutiny Committee next week, for which they're waiting for their work programme. So it might be something actually you say, can you just run your eye over these and make sure they're tucked in with the compliance board, so they are linked together.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thanks. Hopefully a quick one. One of the persistent red ones is the number of fly tips. There's been a few new changes referenced, like the new response team and CCTV and the rest of it. I'd quite like to flag fly tipping and how we've responded and how it's changed as a work programme option for some time in about 6 months' time. Because there's been a few things. It'd be nice to see what's changed and what hasn't and what's worked.
I'd be really supportive of that. Members are. I think it is one of those areas we've looked at a couple of times, yeah, it sort of feels like one of those that's been gone up and down, should we say? So yeah, I think we can. Sorry, did you?
You know, I think we need, yeah, definitely need to add that one because that affects many areas of the district. Yeah. High-profile service, so we'll add to the work programme list.
Mr. Leach.
Through you, Chair, the bit I just add to that is the bit that you've had in your update post questions was about we only record the ones which are on public land. So you might want to, as part of requesting that report, actually understanding why do we only look at the ones on public land, why do we not also capture just for a record of what's going on in the wider, so we can see that wider picture as a council as well, was the thought which came from me for that.
Great, yeah, thank you. Right, Councillor Whiteman.
Sorry, it's just a bit of an obscure one. I think it's a really good report, just wanted to say that. But with Councillor Redford's query on neighbourhood and assets and NA24, most of the measures on here seem to be quantitative, but that one looks like it's qualitative to me. It looks like we're assessing the percentage of cleaning operations to acceptable standards, and I'm just a bit intrigued. How do we actually measure that?
That's a great question. Mr. Leach doesn't know, but again, a good. No, everyone is shaking their heads, but I think it's a fair point actually. That mix between between actually, I guess one person's acceptable standard is another man's still quite messy. Mr. Folk-Skinner.
Yeah, just, I mean, I'm probably years out of date, but it used to be based on Keep Britain Tidy standards. So a length of street, you looked at the how many pieces of litter were in that stretch, or cigarette butts or whatever. So I'm talking probably 5-6 years ago, whether this is still the same, but there was national standards as to what was classed as an acceptable at the different grades of cleanliness on streets. That was Keep Britain Tidy, that was. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. We've all learnt something. Thank you very much. Councillor Redford, I think I'll probably make this the last question, unless I've got others coming.
I understand what you just said, but it's failing miserably in the rural areas because you constantly go along. I would say the rural part of some of the A roads are like dustbins. So, you know, I don't know how you would measure that because it changes. It changes from day to day. I have driven along the A445. One day it's clear of practically any litter, and then the next day you would have thought that I had a party along there because it's so bad. So I just don't know how you arrive at.
Well, I'm afraid I don't work for neighbourhood services anymore, so I can't tell you. But I'm out of date. So.
I think Mr. Leach is going to rescue us before we end up in a wormhole.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, Chairman, thank you for that. I think that's one where we can feed back to the head of neighbourhood for them to bring back in their report, so you can understand, in terms of street cleaning, for that specific measure, because that's where one of the concerns is, what is our area of responsibility and what is the frequency as well, both rural and urban, so you just get that bit of a wider understanding.
Great, thank you. Right, so we're going to wrap that up. Thank you, Mr. Leach, for presenting that, and thank you for all the work that's gone into that. It was interesting being reminded by Councillor Kohler of all the discussions we had about dashboards, and we have one. So that's great, and from my perspective, this is a much easier to digest set of performance data than we've had previously. I think my challenge probably to all the officers as we get into the service service area plans is to make sure we can connect those up with the dashboard in such a way that it still gives us a sense of what we're actually looking at and what's most important. So a couple of things coming out of that. So obviously there's a note to ID to the head of neighbourhood about the ID Verdi performance review, contract review, sorry, and what we're going to cover, and a note also to the chair of the Housing Scrutiny Committee, just to ask them to ensure that they're also looking at the housing items on this, and we add fly tipping to something we'll come back to on the work plan programme probably in about 6 months' time. I think is the time to do that. Great. Okay. Right. Thank you. Right. We're now moving on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Climate Change and Biodiversity Engagement and Communications Activity Report. We've got Graham Folk Skinner and Chloe Wiltshire here this evening. Thank you. Welcome to ONS. Could I just ask you to just give us an overview of the report, and then we'll see if we've got any questions from members.
Yep, thank you, Chair. It was based, the reason for the report was it came from an ONS in July last year, where it was suggested that we produce a regular update on the communications within the climate change team. So we haven't included everything on here because it didn't need it. So we've selected what we consider to be the main comms the initiatives that we've done effectively this year, and then we've put the stats in there, and we've put a description as to what the different statistics mean, and we've also predicted what we're planning to do in the next quarter, and some learning points or how to evaluation of how those communication initiatives went. I mean, we meet up monthly with media, so as a climate change team, we meet up monthly with media, and we go through the initiatives that we're planning to do. One of the suggestions in here is that we would try and formalise that a bit more, and actually, because there is a comms plan, and Chris Walton in media is going to sort of adjust the comms plan to reflect what we need from it. So the idea is that we only get any sort of significant initiatives. For example, the one that's coming up for me is the public consultation on the cycle route across Abbey Fields, for example. That will need a comms plan. So what we're going to do is fill out a comms plan. Who do we want to communicate with? How are we going to do it? So, and then we'll have that on record so that we can then go back and reflect on that. How well do we do? We haven't done that as much as we should have done, and I think we can be more disciplined in the way we approach communications, and that's the way forward for us. So yeah, I mean, it's hopefully self-explanatory. I've answered. There's a couple of questions that came in. I think one from you, Chair, around whether there was any sector markers, benchmarkers, and there isn't. There is no set sort of government sort of targets or percentages that we can refer to. But what we do is on a corporate basis is that the media set out on a quarterly basis of 5% engagement. So we can work with that, and but there is no national sort of sector standards, if you like. So we're trying to learn from our own experience, really. So yeah, so I'm open to any questions there might be.
Okay, members, any questions? Councillor Redford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this should be asked in this particular report, but some years ago we decided that we would plant, Dave, 160,000 trees? Yep. How are we doing with the tree planting? I'm not sure, this might be a bit unfair. You know, only a bit.
I'm not sure whether Dave can answer it better than I do, but I think it's the emphasis is slightly changed, I think, Dave.
Yeah, I think, sorry, just to keep us on track as well, Councillor Redford, because the report is about the communications. It's probably a little bit unfair to put officers on the spot about tree planting. If someone wants to...
My apologies, Chairman.
No.
I'm only asking
I'll
the
give
question.
it a go if you like, though. As you know, there was cross-party agreement to try and tackle the ecological crisis more broadly. So a biodiversity action programme has been developed and agreed, and I'm sure you're well aware it's several habitats are looked at, so it's not just trees. So that's the basic approach that we're going for now, so it's not just trees. There's also been a bit that sheer numbers isn't a really good metric. In the previous administration, if one died, that didn't matter. It does matter, of course, but it still counted. So we've not done that. Our strategic director, Dave Barber, will be able to give you more details on, because we have had a fund for Trees for the Future, and the basic issue was having land to put in a sensible way to put the number of trees in. And you will know a few months ago we tried very hard to get a plot of land but didn't manage on that. And in the next cabinet report, I think I can say this, that we tried hard for another one, and in fact it was far too expensive, so we tried giving a big grant to Warwickshire Wildlife Trust to get the land, if you see what I mean. So the money went further, but again, sadly, that was unsuccessful. So we haven't got as far as we'd have liked in terms of trees, and it's not the pure focus now, because it's the Biodiversity Action Programme overall. Do you want to add anything?
Perhaps just bringing it back to comms. I mean, one of the purposes for having a figure of 160,000 trees was because the previous leader made a public statement about it, and it was kind of a piece of news. And we have kept a track of how many trees have been planted along the way, and I think we're up around 30,000. But in the pipeline, we also have significant tree planting planned for Newbold Common and Tatchbrook Country Park. So we. I think by the time we've done all of that, it's somewhere in the 90,000s or somewhere around that we're likely to get to. But of course, as Councillor Davison's just said, that there are potential for us to invest in other bits of land for tree planting or biodiversity more widely to keep us moving forwards beyond that as well.
Right, thank you.
Chairman, I apologise for putting you on the spot, but you talked about meadows and everything, so I thought I'd bring in the trees.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from Councillor Kohler?
Thank you very much for the report. It's very interesting reading. Love particularly the appendices, they're very detailed. So I'd got two questions, I think. Firstly, I noticed that in the communication, you've got communication types tables going throughout. A couple of them mention press releases. So I think this is all relates to the calendar year of 2024. And if I'm reading the report correctly, it says that in this area we issued 2 press releases over the calendar year. Does that sound right? Or am I missing something or misinterpreting something?
Could you use your mic, please, Grant?
Yourself, sorry. Potentially the press releases for the highlighted initiatives, but that does sound low. I mean, it sounds as if there should be more than that. So I can double check on that if you'd like me to, Councillor. I can take it away and ask the question, but that does seem low. Yeah, you're right.
I think that would be interesting just to know if there's another category where there have been more, or exactly why that is low, because I thought it sounded low.
Yeah.
The other question I'd got is again slightly left field, but on the council climate action scorecards, which is they do a national thing, and Warwick District is just one of all the councils that contribute to it. Do they have any metrics that they gather around communications?
Oh, that's a good question about the communications. They certainly got lots of metrics. Whether they, I'm not sure. I don't know whether I'm not sure. Again, I can check because Chloe's been very hard at work putting our latest report together. So again, I can go away and ask that because I can't answer the question. I don't think that you know. No. So I'll come back to you. Sorry, I can't answer that.
I'm sure there are various metrics around engagement, but whether there are about media, I just don't know.
Yes. No.
Sorry.
No. We'll find out.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Armstrong.
The photography competition seems to have done really well in terms of efficiency, just from engagement numbers looking at this. Are there any more things along those lines planned or evolutions of that in the future?
I mean, because I looked at that, and you look at you look at the photography, and you think, yeah, that's really engagement. And I think what happened there is that people saw it, and then thought of a friend or a relative and said, yeah, they'll be interested. So I think a lot of that was when you have it on Facebook or something, you put your name in, and then it gets sent to your friend or your relative and what have you. So that was high profile, and the engagement was high because of that, because of the nature of it. It's going to happen again. I think the photography competition is more than likely going to be happening again in this year, 25. So, yes, to answer your question. So.
Great, thank you. I'll come to Councillor Luckhurst in a moment. Just building on that point, Councillor Armstrong, I think it's so there's some really good work here, and a lot of really nice communications has gone out. So thank you, and thank you for the report. What would be good is if we can start to think about how can we start to measure outcomes rather than outputs. So actually the photography competition is actually quite a nice example of there is an outcome there, which is an entry to a competition. So we know the communications actually worked, it's landed, it's motivated a behaviour that we wanted to see. Because I was thinking similarly when I looked at section 2.2 in the Green Homes grant, there's all the communications metrics there, but actually it would be helpful if we had a click-through metric, for instance. So if there was this number of people actually clicked on a link and went through to the application, even if we can't track them all the way through, at least we can see that the campaign that we did actually sent them off somewhere to take the next step. So I think that would probably just sharpen up the benefits as well. So Councillor Luckhurst.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you probably found that you get the most social media engagements from potentially contentious issues, like a lot of people complaining about no MA. So I just want to say, well done with the photography competition. That's a nice, more positive way of getting engagement than just having controversial things on there. So that's what it was.
Thank you. But with regards to No Mo May, I mean, it's not me directly, but we are learning. So we've learned over the next couple of years. If we do it again, that's a real learning curve, and the comms helps us with that. It may be negative, but okay, we'll refine it for next year. So it's all useful stuff. So.
And obviously, the more engagement you get, the more kind of potentially got to get our case out there as to why it's a good idea. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Great. Okay. Well, look. Thank you, Graham and Chloe. It's a really good report, and it's good to see all the work. It's nice to actually pull it together into one place as well. I'm sure we all see it coming through in bits on our social media feed, and also through the press releases on our to our emails. But good to see it all in one place. So thank you very much. Great. Right. Okay. We're now moving on to item 8, which are the 2 papers on Milverton Homes. I do need to go into confidential session on this, so I will propose that we consider resolving that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 that the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items by reason of the likely disclosure of exempt information within the paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 following the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006, and this is due to the commercial sensitivity of the items that we're discussing now. I will propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Luckhurst, thank you. All those in favour? Okay, right, that's unanimous. We are now going into confidential session.